Thank you very much, everybody, for being here. My name's Ben Franklin. I'm the President of the Upper House, and along with the Speaker of the Lower House, we are the presiding officers over the entire parliamentary precinct. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal clan of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to pay my respect to their elders past and present, to thank them for their custodianship of this land for many tens of thousands of years. Welcome to the first of this year's series of Parliament Unpacked. This is a really important series of events that we put on each year through the Parliamentary Education and Engagement program, where we invite members of the public into the Parliament on a sitting night to meet and engage with your representatives. There is something really special about a democratic process where you can have immediate, direct and total engagement with the people who represent you. And I'm so thrilled that the very first session that we've got this year is, of course, new MPs on the block. And it couldn't be more appropriate. Every election, the entire lower house, the 93 electorates are all re-elected every 4 years. And this year, of course, there was an election and a change of government, which means that there are often a number more new members of Parliament than there otherwise would be. In the Upper House, there are 42 members, and at every election every 4 years, 21 of those members, 21 I should say, 21 of those members get elected. And so that means that there are 8-year terms, and there's always that corporate history. Half of the Upper House are always there when the new half of the Upper House gets elected. And I'm thrilled that we've got 6 absolutely outstanding local representatives here tonight. And the best thing is, every single one of them is from a different political organisation or a different part of the political sphere. I've had the pleasure of either knowing a number of these people for many, many, many years and knowing that they are genuine community advocates and extremely bright people, very capable public representatives, or I've had the privilege of just meeting them recently, but it's become apparent to me that all 6 of them are going to leave a substantial mark on not just this place, but also the state of New South Wales. I'm particularly thrilled to introduce them officially and formally. Judy Hannan, who is the new independent member for Wollondilly. Susan Carter, the Honourable Susan Carter, who is a new Liberal Party member in the Legislative Council in the Upper House. Trevo, who is the new Labor Party member for the seat of Cabramatta. John Ruddick, who is the new and I think the first Liberal Democratic Party member in the Legislative Council. Michael Kemp, who is the new National Party member for the seat of Oxley, up on the mid-north coast, and Dr Amanda Cohn, down from the south of the state, who is a new Greens member in the Legislative Council. All 6 of those, I think you will be delighted to hear from. They have an incredibly varied array of experiences and a very different take on what politics looks like in this state. I'm sure you'll enjoy the session a great deal, and I hand back to Daniela.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, for that very, very warm welcome. Particularly as we know that you were in the chair in the Legislative Council only seconds earlier, so thank you so much. Great. It's my great pleasure now to ask each of the members to speak for 5 minutes about perhaps what they did before the election, who they were before becoming a new MP on the block, perhaps what it's been like the last couple of months, or anything that you like. Leave it up to you, really, and then we'll have time for some questions afterwards. So 5 minutes each, and you'll see me starting to get very jiggly if you go over 5 minutes, but I trust that you won't. So let's begin. I might start with Susan Carter. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Danielle. Lovely to be here. Lovely to see so many people interested in how this place works and how democracy works. It's very exciting, actually. I've thought a lot about the answer of, how did I get to be one of the new kids on the block? And it's not as easy as it sounds to answer that question. The first temptation is to go through your CV, and I'm a lawyer, so I have a typical CV for people who are here. I've also spent many years in higher education. I've also always been very involved in the communities in which I've found myself. I don't really think that my CV is the answer to why I'm here. I think, and what I've observed too being in this place, it's more who I am rather than what I've done, which brings me here. Because if I think about the family in which I was raised, I grew up in a Catholic family oriented towards thinking about others and service. I had that same reinforcement through my education, and it was very clear in our family that if you saw a problem, you did something about it. You didn't walk past the person who needed something, you worked out what could be done. And I guess you go through your life and you're dealing with schools and you're dealing with things at work, and I think as a lawyer you often have the privilege to see systemic issues and individual issues which need to be addressed, and you learn about a lot of the legal tools for how they are addressed. I had the great privilege to work in education where you're looking at change, I guess, on a more individual level, and the great changes that you as somebody who's an educator, but those being educated make in their own lives, and you see all of the challenges. You spend a lot of time on the side of netball courts and cricket fields and swimming pools and ice skating rinks and all those other things you do as a parent, and you spend a lot of time at tuck shop and at band camp and all those things, and you just realise all the things that need to be done. So I think why I'm here is not because of my CV, but because of who I am and what I see as making value in the world. And two things I really noticed since I've been here. One is, have your phone with you at all times, because depending which bells ring and what message I get on my phone, I might have to rush out and vote. But the other thing is that everybody here is different. Everybody at this table is different. We all represent different parties. But my observation is that everybody is really here for the same reason, that they are people who have a strong set of values, care deeply about their community, and really want to give to that community. A number of people I know took pay cuts to come here. This is not sort of climbing the greasy pole, this is contributing to community, and I think that's been the really most heartwarming thing I've experienced being here. It's really about service over self, which is a great place to work.
Great, thank you so much. Let's give her a clap for going first. Tree, Mr. Trevo, would you like to?
Yes, thanks. And welcome everyone to New South Wales Parliament. And it's just so exciting to see so many people interested in New South Wales Parliament and politics. I just wanted to explain a little bit, tell you a little bit about myself. I was a boat refugee, something I'm quite proud of, and something I'd like to talk about and share with you, just like any other story. I was a boat refugee. My dad, and I'm quite proud of it. And every time I have a CV, especially to the Labor Party or whatever, I always put boat refugee, like as if it's one of my life experience, one of my qualifications. And my dad was a helicopter pilot. He was trained in America for about 2 years, and he participated in the Vietnam War. And before the Vietnam War ended in 1975, 1 month beforehand, he was shot down. And then they took him to as a prisoner, a political prisoner. So he stayed there for 7 years. 7 years, and then when he went out in 1982, us as a family, that's parents, 4 boys, I'm the youngest, we planned our escape from Vietnam. The first time we were unsuccessful, and the second time we were successful in a small boat, 12 meters long, 128 people on board, 3 meters wide, and we went on high seas for about 4 days. 4 nights. We survived mainly on water, and we were quite lucky to have water. And we were rescued by a Dutch ship, taken to Bidong Island, which is an island in Malaysia. And then we stayed there for a couple of months, and then we flew to Edinburgh Hostel, which is the eastern side of Sydney. And then we stayed there for a couple of months, and I relocated, settled in Marrickville. And I consider myself quite lucky, because I've heard stories, I've Googled stories, and so many stories where the boats were drifted for months, for weeks and months, and people died from starvation and sometimes they have to resort to eating human flesh to survive. And there were stories like, people saw pirates and all that, and they were physically and sometimes sexually assaulted and thrown overboard, killed and all that. And we're quite lucky because I've read up, and about 800,000, between the space of 1975 to 95, 800,000 people, boat people, landed safely. But out of that, the UNHCR, which is United Nations High Commission for Refugees, estimated 200,000 to 400,000 people had died. That's just an estimate, because the Vietnamese authorities would never say reveal the exact names and numbers. But even out of those numbers, that means for every 2 or 3 people who landed safely to places like Australia, Canada, America, New Zealand, England, France, out of every 2 or 3 who landed safely, about 1 had died. So I consider myself quite lucky. And so I grew up in Marrickville, came to Australia 6 years old, went to public schools in Marrickville, primary and high school, and then I did a double degree in commerce and law. And then in 2001, started looking for work, started in Bankstown for 1 year, and in Fairfield 2 years, and then set up my own law firm in Kenley Heights, very close to Cabramatta. This was a time where a lot of families would move out of Cabramatta, wouldn't want anything to do to be associated with Cabramatta, its name or its communities. But I was drawn into it, the people, the community. And from there, I was very active in the community, Labour Party in 2010, on executive positions in the Labour Party, and ran for a number of positions, like, say, Upper House, Labour ticket, number 10, or council. But people knew my aim and my love was always to represent Cabramatta. I worked as a lawyer, so ever since, I started up my law firm in Kenley Heights from 2004, and continue to work closely with communities and Labour Party until the recent election in 25th of March 2023. I lived there with my wife and 3 children, and all my 3 children were born in Fairfield, the local Fairfield hospital. And that's my story, unless you have any other questions later. And thanks for hearing and listening to my story. A little bit different, but I'm very happy to share it with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Judy Hannan, member for Wollondilly.
So that probably tells you one of the most interesting things about coming to Parliament is meeting all these different people with different backgrounds. It makes it really interesting. So I don't have a law degree, nor have I been interested in that direction. I keep saying I am an optometrist, but I guess I was an optometrist in my own practice in South Western Sydney for many years, and ended up in regulation. So I ended up the chair of the Australian Optometry Board, which was really, really interesting. But during that process, along the way, if you care for people, especially in the health realm, you tend to take on their other issues that people have locally, and ended up in council. And along the way, I've run for state parliament a few times. Mostly it's been about not necessarily winning, but it's about calling out and saying this is what our community want, and trying to prompt the people that are going to win to promise more for that particular area. I still remember the first day I signed up at university and I wrote my address out, and somebody looked over my shoulder and they said, "Oh, Granville, how did you get here?" And that was in the day when there were no universities in Western Sydney. You had to travel. So it was really rare for anybody from your family to even go to university. During the election, again, I stood again to stand in a very safe seat. It's been the same political party for many years, and I simply stood to say we deserve better, and because you're safe, you therefore only get the leftovers, so as to speak. I didn't expect to be elected, but I'm absolutely delighted to be elected. During the election, I met so many more of the people in my electorate, and we all, you can imagine, not being a party, this was simply community run, and people came out of the woodwork that simply wanted to see a change and had had enough. So that was really interesting. you saw a lot of happy people, but you also obviously had the trolls and the internet that said all sorts of things. And they tried to classify you. They tried to call me a till candidate, and they try all sorts of things. And they don't do it in any positive way. They do it to try and drag you down. But I'm very lucky because I'm independent. I come here of a daytime and I'm fascinated watching both. I sit in a really good position and I watch both sides. I see the positives and the negatives. I also see the crossbench as being quite respectful as compared to the political parties. They get their scripts of what they have to say and when they have to say it. We only get our time. So I can devote that time to whatever's necessary for my particular electorate. And I loved hearing Ben Franklin stand here and say, you know, this gives you your connection to these politicians. Well, my door's open, and because I'm not a political party, I have that connection every single day. So it has a welcome mat, and people are allowed to come in simply for a cup of tea or to discuss anything, even if they want a photocopy or a JP or whatever it is. I believe it's their office, just like this house belongs to the community. In here, the lessons I've learnt, there's not enough hours in the day. It goes very quickly. You never complete anything. It's all done before we know. I think we're supposed to run out now, I do believe.
Yes, so that's a Legislative Assembly bell.
Yeah.
So if you need to just go, and then if you can just pop back in.
I need to go.
We'll get the upper house to,
please
to hold
take
the
over.
fort. Thank you. I'll be back. And this is one of the absolute joys of working in Parliament, is that you can plan it as much as you want and have a program perfectly planned, but we are in Parliament, and the actual exciting part is actually happening in the chambers. So that sounds like it's a Legislative Assembly bell, and when they come back, we'll just ask them what that was and what they had to do. But, okay, so let's continue. Mr. John Ruddick, would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Thank you. So I grew up in Tamworth in rural New South Wales, and when from about the age of 9, I just became hooked on watching the news and reading the newspaper. And my mother bought me the World Book encyclopedias about that time, and I didn't go particularly good at school because I used to just spend all my time reading, particularly about history. And when I finished school, I had no interest. It hadn't really occurred to me to go to university, but I worked on an outback farm for 2 years, and I know most 19, 20-year-olds are out partying, but I would just I'd work very long hours and I would just read books about history. I was just obsessed with history. Then I met some people who told me that I really should go to university, so I went to Sydney University and I did an arts degree, and I had to complete 18 courses, and 17 of those courses were all about history. And so I got involved with the Liberal Party because I came to the view that the lesson of history is that we want smaller government. Big government is dangerous government. So I joined the Liberal Party, and I had quite a dysfunctional relationship with the Liberal Party for about 27 years, in that I was sort of... the major parties are very much dominated by factional control, and I thought, look, we really need to open it up so that merit wins. I never really had the intention of running for Parliament myself, and I led a few campaigns within the Liberal Party to change the rules to make it a much more democratic party, so that we would have primaries like they do in the United States, and that their parliamentary leaders are elected by the membership. Anyway, and I thought that would be my contribution to politics. And then a little thing came along called COVID. And I know that there will be people in this room that don't agree with my position, but I was horrified by the way that we overreacted. And I thought that we were treating this as though it was an Ebola outbreak, when it was a bad version of a respiratory virus. And it was the Liberal Party governments that were doing it. And I was really pulling my hair out, and they were getting us into an enormous amount of debt. The state and federal Liberal governments were doing it. And they gave us a COVID authoritarian police state. And so then I had been interested in the Liberal Democrats for about 10 years, who are a small party. We've had probably half a dozen members of Parliament in the last 10 years. We're a libertarian party. So that means that on economic issues, we would be to the right of the Liberal Party. So we very much believe in encouraging private enterprise and having a much smaller state. Now, on other issues, we would be quite left. So now Dr. Cohn might correct me here, but I think we were the first party in Australia to be in favour of same-sex marriage, that was in 2001. But I'd be interested to check that to that. So when the party was founded, we said, look, we're in favour of same-sex marriage legislatively. Now, we didn't make a moral call on whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but we just said that we believe in maximising human freedom. Another thing that we would be in favour on is cannabis reform. Now, again, we don't make a moral call on whether cannabis is good or bad, but we don't want a big brother government coming in and telling us that you can't make that decision if you want to. We want a public debate on these issues. And another thing where we really strongly disagree with the coalition is war. War, we believe, in almost all cases can be avoided. We look at World War I and we just think this was a catastrophic error, a war over nothing, and it really, did set the 20th century off to a very, very bad start. And now we're not pacifists. We believe that there will occasionally be threats that need to be confronted, but we believe in almost all cases wars start not because the people of countries dislike each other, but because we've chest-beating politicians who've got big egos and they stumble into these things. So I joined the Liberal Democrats thinking that my purpose was just simply to help this little party, who I thought were taking a very noble stand against the COVID police state. But events transpired and then they asked me to run for Parliament. So it is a little bit daunting being the only member of a Parliament or member of a party in the Parliament. And I had previously been a staffer in Canberra in the 1990s, but I had not been a staffer in New South Wales Parliament. So it is all very new to me. But the thing is, there are an enormous amount of resources for new members, and there's always sort of somebody to hold your hand and learn. So I am hoping, one of the things that I do want to achieve is that I do believe strongly that we need to have a royal commission into everything to do with COVID. We keep being told that there's another pandemic around the corner, which I am sceptical of, but if that is true, then surely we should have a very thorough examination of what went right and what went wrong during that period, because all this inflation, all these high interest rates, it is all directly attributable to what I believe was an overreaction on COVID. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Now that Legislative Assembly bell is still going, so I'm very keen to know exactly what's going on in that chamber when the members get back. Dr. Amanda Cohn, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you. Sorry, I've been wearing a mask because I've got a bit of a cold and I didn't want to spread my germs in the Parliament. It's very difficult to take a sick day in this job. My name's Dr. Amanda Cohn. I represent the Greens in the Upper House. I'm a country GP. I live in Albury-Wodonga, and I spent the last 10 years also serving my community as a state emergency service volunteer, driving flood boats, and I was doing a night shift operating the radios in the fire control centre in Lake George the night that Cobargo burned. Through those experiences on the front line of the climate crisis with the State Emergency Service, working in a health system that is utterly broken, and trying to support my patients with issues that are directly the responsibility of government, so thinking about things like the housing crisis, domestic violence. Through my work, the more I knew about those issues, the more of an interest that I took in politics, and I really found my political home in the Greens, not just because of our shared values of environmental sustainability and social justice, but because of the way that the Greens do politics. We're a party that believe in grassroots democracy fundamentally, and the policies of the party are written by the members rather than by the members of Parliament top down. And I really found my voice as a country GP in a party that valued my voice, that platformed me as a young woman in the country, and I really valued that. My foray into politics was slightly accidental, slightly like Judy. So I stood as a candidate multiple times for seats that I was never going to win. I live in conservative, rural New South Wales. I stood against Susan Lee for federal parliament when she was the health minister, just to make a point about the health system, because when you're a political candidate, the local paper prints what you've got to say. And when you're just a local community member, you don't get that kind of platform. That led me to run for local council in 2016 for a similar reason, just to have a voice, but I accidentally got elected. And I ended up being Deputy Mayor of Albury from 2016 through to 2021. And that really gave me a focus on the failings of the previous state government, but also that it was a role that I really loved, and I felt like I thrived in the same things that I loved about general practice, meeting a huge range of people, understanding what makes people tick and trying to work together to solve problems. I also found in politics. In terms of standing for election, for the upper house, you need to have support from across the whole state, which is nearly impossible to do as an individual. People from outside my community of Albury-Wodonga have no idea who I am, so why would they vote for me? Which is why you've got to get pre-selected by the party. And so for me, the real challenge wasn't the election, it was the pre-selection. And as I said, the Greens have this commitment to grassroots democracy, which means our upper house election ticket is selected by members. There's about 4,000 members of the Greens in New South Wales. It's one member, one vote, and you've got to convince all of them that you're the right person for the job. That process was gruelling. I got asked harder questions by our members in the kind of online forums we did during pre-selection than I've been asked in the 2 months in Parliament so far. But then once you're on a ticket for a major party, of course, I had the support from Greens members and volunteers across the whole state to help me get here, and I'm very grateful to have had that support. Some of the things that I thought would be similar from my old life to my new life were true. I still love meeting people and chatting with people and understanding what they're really passionate about. There's a few lessons that I thought wouldn't be similar. There's an adage when you work in emergency departments that you've got to pee when you can and eat when you can because you don't know when your next break is coming. That's just as true here, as you've just seen with people just unexpectedly running off. I think the biggest lesson that I've had to learn coming here is to be flexible and be reactive. I'm a very organised and driven person, and I can start any week with the best of plans to do work on these particular issues and meet with these particular people. But of course, breaking news happens, or a member of another party moves something in the chamber and the week looks completely different to what I had planned. So in terms of what a typical day looks like as a member, so as a member of the Greens, there's only 7 of us across both Houses of Parliament, which means I have carriage of 8 different portfolio areas. There's not really a warm-up. You don't get any time as a backbencher when you stand for a small party. So I need to stay across 8 different portfolio areas, including health, in terms of what's happening in the news, what other parties are doing, what people are talking about in the chamber, and work with stakeholders and members of the party to come up with Greens positions on those issues in very short amounts of time. But it's very exciting and interesting, and I really enjoy that. And I think my particular focus being here for 8 years, which is the incredible privilege of being in the upper house, we have those really long terms. I'm obviously quite passionate about health system reform. I think we need to see significant changes in the way that healthcare is managed rather than fiddling around the edges. And I'm really grateful to have 8 years to really dive into that work.
Thank you. Thank you. And almost as if we planned it, I'd love to welcome back the Legislative Assembly members. So what I thought we'd do is ask Michael to speak for a few minutes, check in if Judy had anything else that she wanted to say, and then ask the LA members who've just popped out what it was that you went to do. So are we okay with that plan? Okay, great. The member for Oxley, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks. I acknowledge the Gadigal people of the area here, but just as importantly, the Biripi, the Dunghutti and the Gumbunga people from my electorate. I come with a very different CV, and if you're not a council member or a mayor or a lawyer or a journo, you're very different in this place. So 6 months ago, I was a physiotherapist and a farmer with an interest in politics and doing the right thing, but no real background other than I joined the party 3 years ago and COVID put an end to that. So I'm sitting here as probably one of the most raw members that could ever be here. Raw in a sense of political, political party-based ties, and my journey to politics came from my representation. So I'm a volunteer in the community in many different aspects. And I obviously have been a physiotherapist. I have a health business that, we have a couple of clinics on the Mid-North Coast, and as a farmer I touch base with, multiple different community areas, and I love representing people, and I guess that's where they saw the interest in me, and they tapped me on the shoulder and asked me to run for the National Party, and I had to look at that and make sure that I aligned with all of the values, and I strongly do, and I think I've carried that throughout my entire life. So, you know, I'm a family man. I've got a beautiful wife, Bridget, and 3 young boys. They're in their teens. They're 13, 12 and 10. So that's an important aspect of my life, and I think that being in here does take some of that away, because I'm away a lot of the time. I'm in Sydney, or I'm travelling and doing different events at night, and you know, missing out on Saturday sport, and so I cherish every moment now that I get to be on, you know, in the Saturday sport with them. I'm really looking forward to the winter break, to be honest, to spend some time making sure that I'm reconnecting with my family. You know, my business is a three-pronged attack, where I have a clinic in each of the 3 closest towns, and I had to divulge myself of that responsibility when I ran, and my staff were gracious enough to step up, and unfortunately they gave me the notice about 2 weeks in that they couldn't handle operating 3 clinics, so I had to sell one to continue running for Parliament, which I've done. The background of volunteering, I was a little bit of a kid that didn't know where he was going, and one of those kids at school that got the reports of could do really well if he could only concentrate, and you know, that came about from a bit of family upheaval and stuff like that. So I joined the Defence Force when I was 19 and 20, and that gave me the missing link that I had to find, which was a bit of structure and some rules and regulations, and some things to follow to find what I needed to find to help me to present myself in the best light. And I did, and you know, ever since then I've been lucky enough to be selected to be on 3 operations overseas into war zones, and if I wasn't out there, I was in the middle of Queensland training to go on war zones, and so that was pretty intense, and that responsibility I took really significantly. And that gave me the structure to work really hard and dot the I's and cross the T's when I left the Defence Force into my physiotherapy career. And I've always been a farmer, so that's the other string in the bow. They asked us to talk about, being a new MP, and I've just written a few notes down. I think it was pretty confronting to be campaigning in the media and exposing the parts of my life, like specifically my family and my kids. There were a couple of issues. It's the most difficult job I've ever seen. It's the best job I've ever had, and it's certainly the most privileged job I've ever had. The representation part of it, all of you here are represented, I presume, if you're from New South Wales, by someone that sits in our chairs. And that is such a responsibility that we need to make sure that we are considering all of your points of view to bring across. And we argue that in the chamber all the time. And it is great to hear the different sides. And I'm the type of person that will listen and consider and challenge myself as to why I think a certain way. So I think that's a really wonderful thing, and part of being in Parliament is to consider all those different points of view. And you've heard many different stories here already tonight. So I think, I've learned to love public speaking, although I'm still perfecting the art. It's quite a difficult thing to be presenting to just, the 30 or 40 in here. Sometimes we present to, a couple of hundred, and even, the Premier and the office bearers, they present to many more at times. So public speaking is probably the part that I dislike the most, but I'm learning to love. So that's my 5 minutes. Hopefully it stimulates some questions.
Great, thank you very much. So thank you, all of you, for sharing those stories and telling us about yourselves. And I kind of noticed they're all very different backgrounds and different stories, and yet there were quite a few commonalities in there as well. And I'm just checking in, Judy, did you want to add anything there?
I guess I won't say too much more about myself or why I'm here, except that there's a book called The Lorax by Dr. Zeus. I don't know if anybody here has read it, but at the end he's talking about a community that are under threat, and at the end it says, if someone like you is not going to do anything and someone doesn't care, then nothing's going to get better. It's not. And I believe that probably every politician that is in here has that at the back of their mind. It's not a children's story, but it's the theory of why we're all here.
Yeah, thank you. And is that common theme that I was picking up as I was listening, that from very different walks of life, that accidentally becoming an MP, but really the kind of person that obviously we've been hearing from. There's a drive there to represent and to look after community. So thank you very much. Can we thank them for their time? And then, because we can tell it's quite a busy night, would somebody from the LA tell us, what did you do? What were the 2 sets of bells that we heard? What was happening?
We did a dance.
Well, I was actually thankful to Amanda because I was oblivious to. I heard the bells, but I was here to talk about it. So I was thankful that she said, "Is that your bells?" Do you mind if I speak? Yeah, okay. Guys, we had a division, and so we're currently we have what's called what's the public interest debate? Yep. Okay, we call it a PID, so I just had to think about what it was. So a public interest debate, and that could be any topic that's that the public's interested. And at the moment, one of the topics that we're talking about, and that debate in particular, was about the wages cap. And if you're following politics, you would have heard that that's probably a pretty topical issue at the moment. And so we had, was it 40 minutes, I think it was, of discussions and of speakers speaking on it from the government side, the opposition side and the crossbench. And then it came to the actual voting part. And the voting part was whether or not we supported amendments to it. That was the first set of bells. And those that voted against won that. And then, so because the amendments weren't passed, we had to actually vote on the bill, on the public interest debate. And so then the question changed, so to do you support the public interest debate, the bill? Yeah. And so eventually it came down to we all had to swap sides, so we did the do-si-do. Those that sat on that side and wanted the amendments to go ahead, it got put down, so we had to vote. So we had to go over the other side, and the other side so we had 93 people in the chamber crossing sides and all in that small space, and that's what the second set of bells were for. And yeah, I think that's
did
about...
it pass?
It passed, yeah.
So
the numbers are with the government.
Correct. So the amendment, no, but the actual final vote, yes. So if you have seen an image of our chambers, when the members are voting or a division, they enter the chamber from the back, and if you are voting yes, you sit on the right-hand side of the speaker, and if you're voting no, you sit on the left-hand side. So normally on the right-hand side of the speaker is the government, left-hand side is the opposition. So if you were to walk in there and they're voting and they've swapped sides, you can get a little bit worried and think, has the government changed? But no, it's just a division. Great, thank you. Okay, we've got some time now, so we might open it up, unless anybody has any more comments or any other comments. Yep. We might open it up to some questions from the audience. We've got a couple of roving mics with our parliamentary communications, education and engagement team members. So if you want to ask a question, if you can grab the mic from one of our team members and tell us your name, and we've got number 1 here, question 1's always the hardest, and tell us your name and ask your question. You might want to ask a particular member, or you might want to ask all the members to say something, and we might try to keep answers to about 30 seconds to a minute, and I'll start to get edgy again. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is constituent of New South Wales. My question's not for a specific person, but it probably applies to anyone who'd be happy to answer. What's the difference in your life between being a community activist as opposed to being a person who's now responsible for assessing and passing legislation?
Great question. Thank you. Yes, Susan.
I think you answered it in the question. It's that sense of responsibility, because I suppose if you're advocating for a certain group or you're hoping to get a certain project done, that's what you think about. But then on this side of the chamber, there's a lot more weighing and considering and responsibility. Yeah, absolutely.
Amanda.
I thought I'd jump in because I think the Greens probably have a different answer to this question than other people would, and particularly as a crossbencher, I recognise that change happens both in and outside of Parliament, and often if we want to convince the government to do something, it's not just about winning the debate in the chamber, it's about convincing the public and then supporting activists and community groups to actually platform their voices and have their voices heard. So I think that line is very blurry, and particularly my role as a Green is to support and platform community activists, and I've already in my 2 months here found myself speaking at a protest outside the front of Parliament, supporting protesters as well.
Great, thank you. Anybody?
I think staff We have, like, I always got a lot of community things that I needed to do, but having the staff to actually follow right through to the end and keep following through, I think that makes a difference.
I think there are similarities and differences. The similarities are like, yes, you have a certain topic you're interested in, and you have to advocate for it. As an activist, and also as an MP, that you have certain interests, you have to advocate, and you follow it through. But there are differences. Like, say myself, I'm part of the party, and so therefore, some of the stands are determined by the party, and the majority of the party, like the caucus and all that. So and also you have to think for what's in the best interest of the electorate in the area as well. So although there are similarities, there are also differences. Like.
Great, thank you.
I might just throw a little bit in there. I think that for me there is a bit of a difference, and it's the fact, like I think a little bit like Susan said, the being an activist is generally about a single issue at the time. Like, you can be an activist for multiple issues, but the issue that you're bringing is a single issue. And on the other side, we have to sit there and go, okay, well, how does that affect the rest of the members in society? And so there's that weighing up of cost versus benefit, or, you know, trade-off versus the gain that you're going to get from that issue. So I think from me, I probably sat there and thought that maybe we wouldn't have to face that as much from the other side, and now it really does weigh on you, the responsibility of making that decision.
Great. Thank you. And we've got another question.
Hello.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, what do each of you do when it comes to educating people in your electorate about how government works, how voting works, just the basics? Because I think that's something that frequently comes up. People don't really understand the basics of how government works and how people can interact with it.
Great, thank you. Would anybody like to have a go?
Yeah, I think, I don't know whether that's still, obviously the upper house members here represent the whole of New South Wales, you know, so that's the three of us at LA when you talked about electorates. For my issue, I tried to, you know, educate. I love educating. I love mentoring, and so I tried to educate as many people as I could, but I didn't have a specific overall strategy. Like I had a few online things that we pushed out to educate people how to vote and the options that they could have within voting. But that's what I did. I'm not sure about the other guys.
Our biggest issue as an independent is the pain of optional preferential. It weighs against an independent because people don't need to number through, and you'll find the parties, if they're in power, will run a just vote one. And so to educate the population that they should use their vote fully and keep numbering through is a really big educational piece that we tried to undertake, but people still didn't quite get it. Or I think you'd see some differences in many seats.
I think it's a huge issue that we frankly need to do more about. When I was pre-selected as a candidate for the upper house, in fact, there are still people in my family who insist on calling me a senator, and I've just given up. You know, it's, yeah, whatever. Yes. The understanding of even the two houses, and I spent a lot of my life teaching lawyers, actually teaching adults who were retraining typically, so people who had voted, and even in that cohort, which you would think would be an educated cohort, they're interested in the system, I was reduced to saying things like, remember last election, there was the big paper and the little paper. Mm-hmm. Well, the big paper's the upper house and the little paper's the lower house. And we have a great privilege in this state and in this country that we are, I think, one of the strongest representative democracies in the world, but that is as strong as all of the people who vote. And we need everybody to really understand the privilege that they have in voting and understand what they're doing. And I am concerned that everybody doesn't always do that.
Yeah, I mean, you're raising the issue of political literacy, which is so important. And I didn't directly undertake any of that kind of work because no one wants to hear this from a candidate or a political party. That's not a source that people trust on how the system works and how voting works. It really should be coming from the Electoral Commission. And here in New South Wales, there's only one person who does education across the whole state. Across from the Murray River, Norbury-Wodonga, the Victorian government employs 70-something people to do that work statewide. So the work that the Greens have done have been trying to bolster the New South Wales Electoral Commission to actually do that work from a neutral perspective politically, from a source that people can actually trust. And I think on that note, it's worth a shout out to the parliamentary education team who put on events like this, who are doing some of that work in New South Wales that the Electoral Commission needs to also be doing.
Great, thank you.
When you're saying educating the public about the voting system, are you just saying about this state election, or are you talking about the whole system, or federal or state, or in general in the future? I'm not quite sure.
I'm more concerned with, I guess, general political literacy, so that people are aware of how they can access and engage with policy and with policy formation and government process. I think a lot of people, because they feel they don't understand it or they're intimidated by it, it's a huge barrier for them to be engaged and think more about it.
Yeah, like because I've been involved in the election, like whether it's local or federal, it's quite different. Like, you know, federal election you had to number all the boxes, and then the local, sometimes you number all the boxes, sometimes you don't, and then there's also the upper house and upper house and lower house and all that. But in my electorate, I think me being there is quite important in terms of getting people interested in politics, because sometimes people vote because it's compulsory. They're just there to vote, or they just vote because of a certain party that they're familiar with, they feel comfortable with. But I think myself being there, hopefully we'll not only educate some of our voters, but also to get them interested in politics. Politics can be fun. And it's very, it's a powerful thing. Like, you know, like a lot of our residents, the community, they left the country because they couldn't vote, and that's why they should use this opportunity to vote and see how important it is. And I think, they have language barriers, and hopefully in the future, through the interest and through explain to people, even the local election, state, federal, they're all different. And you know, hopefully it's a slow process, because even us, sometimes in politics, we don't even fully understand all the system, whether upper house, lower house, and preferential system and all that. But it's a process, I think.
Thank you. John?
Well, look, we do have a radically different view to my colleagues. As a Libertarian Party, we don't believe the government should be forcing people to vote. Australia is one of the few democracies in the world where the state compels you to vote. Now, in most democracies, where it's up to you if you want to vote, it varies, but it's typically 30 to 40% of people on election day say, I don't have an opinion on this. Now, that is not a bad thing. If you go to countries where the vast majority of people are fired up about politics, it's a sure sign that there's turmoil. Now, in a free society, there's going to be lots of people out there who are just not that interested. Now, they might become interested in the future, they might have been interested in the past, but not voting is a form of voting. They might say that I'm not interested, they might say I don't like any of the parties, and that people should have that freedom to do it. So I'm not overly concerned. In fact, it's a sign of a good society when a lot of people are spending their lives on other productive pursuits. And if politics doesn't come to them naturally, we don't think that's a crisis.
Thank you. And it's interesting on that note that I've noted as one of the parliamentary educators that people get to know more about the political system and become more interested during times of crises as well. So that's a boon for civic educators like myself. And we have had different types of turmoil. But yeah, it's fantastic. Great to hear the very different opinions too from the panel. Thank you for that question. So we have, so I'm just looking at time. So how about we go 3, 4 and 5 and 6, and then we'll see how we go. And we'll keep the answers to about that 30 seconds to a minute because we have a 6:30 finish. So Rita, 3, and then 4 over here, and 5, and then 6 behind you. So that's it for the moment. Let's hope we get through. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, my name is from Tableton, New South Wales. I have two questions tonight.
Oh, I have to stop. One only, sorry. I've got three other people. One question.
Under the current system, how can we get the support from our government? Thank you.
Thank you. So, under the current system of government, how do you get support? More support from government for sports?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Any comments?
Well, I don't
ideas?
think the government should be involved in sport. The government should be taxing people less, and then if people want to voluntarily get involved in sport without wanting to depend on government grants and government system, they should be free to do what they want to do.
Thank you.
I think the only way to get involved and to further your sport is to find out the information that you need to get there, through whatever means that is, and sometimes that's approaching your local member. Sometimes that there's websites out there at the moment, and I'll talk about the grant process. You just brought up the grant process, so the grant process has a single use link now that it's all lodged in the one area. So it's a bit about doing your research and making sure that you've got the community's buy-in, because if you've got multiple levels of buy-in from the participants, the parents, the coaches, the club, your state level, your federal level, your council, if you've got this multiple levels of buy-in, then things tend to look more organised and it's a tried and tested way for us to then support.
Thank you. Did you
and I think that's the wonderful thing about society, like whether it's sports or arts or education, whatever it is, community, whatever. Like there's always grants. You just have to follow up and that's wonderful. Like healthy body, healthy mind, and team spirit and community. That's all great. And you just have to look out. Like there's certain grants in your area, like. And as he said, like in the community or this from council, state, federal, or not, just look out for them, and that's what governments are for. To help you to better, healthier lives and work together. So look out for those grants.
Okay. And when all else fails, you run the sausage sizzle and you raise the money in the community.
Yeah, much better. Yeah.
Thank you. And I will come back to your second question if we get time. And do we have a mic just coming around behind you? There we go.
Hello, my name is... you've mentioned a lot of elements of the job, like being away from family or having to be across multiple different issues. So what is your approach to handling things when, things get a bit too overwhelming or things get a bit too stressful?
Why don't we go around from here and get something from everybody?
I'm happy to go first. I learned this the hard way. I experienced burnout during COVID as a frontline health worker, and I had to carry the lessons from that into this place. There are days in this job where you have to work at absolutely 100% full bore, and it is a 16-hour day of just talking to people and being at action stations. Nobody can maintain that every day, so I think it's identifying those moments when you have to go hard and then identifying the opportunities for rest when you can get it. My favourite thing to do in the world is to spend time with my dog. So for me to be able to get time in Albury and do something mindful that makes me present and not worried about what's happening in politics, even if that's just for half a day, can make these things a bit easier to handle.
Yep, it's the most unique workplace in the world. It is out there. Mine is going for a run or doing some exercise in the morning.
Well, look, I'm pretty lucky. I only live 10 minutes away on a cab drive, and I've got a very supportive family and terrific staff, so I don't really feel much stress.
Great.
Yeah, like I'm quite new, still learning, so really don't have really an answer, but I don't really have an answer to survive here, so I'm still learning. However, from previous experience, from previous professional life, I think what it is in life you just have to prioritize. And give and have some time for yourself as well. Prioritize, have some time for yourself as well.
Look, I think two things. I'm lucky enough to have friends who are not at all interested in politics and like to have coffee, and they're very useful because you have to switch off in a sense. And I think it's always good to just take some time out and reflect, and in my case pray, in other cases meditate, just to put things in perspective in your life too, and recognise the enormous privilege we have to be able to be here and represent all of you.
I swim up and down laps in the swimming pool because while I'm swimming, I can sort things out in my mind. And and I find I get a bit of exercise and also plenty of time to think and chill out.
Great, thank you. Thank you. There's tips. I'm going to take some of those tips. We have a question at the front here. Julia's got a microphone. Thank you.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is, and I hope everybody's doing well today. And Dr. Cohn, I hope you get better from your cold. And my question is regarding about drafting legislation, bills, amendments, stuff like that. As a new member of Parliament, how do you guys feel about experience? Is it hard, and where do you get your ideas from?
Great, thank you. Let's go around maybe that way.
So we get lessons. We make mistakes. I've made 2 mistakes in the last couple of weeks. One, I was supposed to ask a question. One question, I made a whole speech and started to reel off about 8 different questions, I believe, and they stopped me, but everybody laughed about it because they know you're new and they're kind, so we keep learning.
If it's legislation, we're lucky enough to be able to access professional drafters in the Parliamentary Council's office, which is great. And in terms of ideas for legislation, look, they come from the community, they come from issues that we've been working on, they come from the needs that we perceive that not everything should be addressed through legislation, but something should. And so that's where it comes from.
Yeah, it usually comes from when you're in government, like the Labour government, it's usually from the Minister's office, working with the professional drafters of the Parliament, like that's what. But of course, like originate from like debates, debates and people like yourself, like giving ideas and activists and all that, like But the final product is probably the Minister's office with the New South Wales Parliament drafters.
Well, the convention is that you're not allowed to actually propose a bill until you've given your inaugural speech, and I'm doing that at this time tomorrow night. So I haven't proposed any bills, but we certainly hope to. But there is, as Susan said, there's a lot of the clerks will be you go to them with an idea and you say, look, I need help in drafting this. But in terms of where we get our ideas from, well, my party is an ideological party, so we've pretty much got an opinion on everything. So we would sort of see what's current, what sort of would be, relevant to today, and then we'd be looking at drafting bills around that.
I haven't drafted one yet, but I would be using every resource that's available to me, whether it be party, whether it be a solicitor or a lawyer, or whether it be the parliamentary office team, which I must say have done everything. They've been over backwards for us all so far. So, yeah, I'll be using all the resources available.
In terms of ideas, I mean, some of them are things that we ran on. We asked people to vote for us saying we're going to do these things. So there's a laundry list of things I've got to get done. And then people come to you. So, I'm listed online as the Green spokesperson for health. When people have got ideas that the Labor or Liberal Party don't like, they come to me and say, hey, will you platform this? And if we agree, we can do that. The others have already mentioned the Parliamentary Council office, which is just incredible support. It's nonsense that you need to be a lawyer to do this job. I think there's this perception that you have to be a lawyer to understand how to write legislation and how it works. There's a whole team of professional people who you can sit down with, and they can draft things legally and correctly to have the intent that you want them to have. And it's a really good resource.
Great, thank you. We have a minute and we have a question right at the back, which is the only one that we're going to take. And we'll do a quick whip around for answers.
Actually, yes, hi, my name is, and thank you so much for sharing your journeys to date with us. I think my question was actually answered just before. I was going to ask how you balance your family and work, professional life.
Great. Well, there's a lady just at the front that's desperate to ask a question. Let's make it a good one as our last question.
Hello, everyone. My name is Judy, and I recently elected as a president of Federation of Business and Professional Women. And I would like to congratulate each and every one of you to being elected as such a responsible and prestigious position. My question is, I have seen an interesting fact while waiting for this event to be started, Till 1962, there was not a single woman participation in the assembly. And then in 1963, there were 5 women representation was there in the picture. And then rest is the history until 2022, there are so many women participation in the assembly. My question is there still a challenge for the women to be in the assembly? And what is your one suggestion for the future women to be in the assembly? Thank you.
Okay. We did have a first female elected to the Legislative Assembly in the 1920s, but yes, then there was very, very little until much more recently. So, some comments?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. Yes, the challenges still exist. Nearly every day that I've been here, someone has assumed that I'm a member of staff working for a member of parliament. Not that I am the member of parliament. I don't think blokes have that problem. On my very first day as Deputy Mayor of Albury, someone gave me their coffee order at a meeting that I'd arrived to chair. I think the most important thing that we can do as women is to back each other and actually platform each other, support the voices of other women and help each other up the ladder rather than pulling it up behind us.
I obviously can't comment too thoroughly on the topic, other than I think that the traditional role is dissolving more and more as we realise that some women don't want the traditional role and some women do. So I think, Doc, you just said it straight away then. She said, just keep pushing up those voices that want to take on those roles. It's really important that all of the males in the room get behind those women that want those roles and celebrate those that don't as well. I think that's the most important thing is each and every individual woman is different to the next. And my wife, I would like to push her ideas up forward as I would with all the other women in the room.
The person in human history that I consider to be the smartest and who I look up to the most is a female called Ayn Rand. And my favourite politician in my lifetime is Margaret Thatcher. So I don't feel like I'm anti-women, but I do feel strongly that we should be in the political sphere gender blind, and we should be race blind. We should be looking at individuals as individuals, and I think that's important. If we keep going down this rabbit hole, I think it's sort of giving people characteristics over something that's not in their character, and I think that's an important contribution.
I think the Labor Party's got it quite right. Like we've got nearly around 50% of female MPs already. So I think the Labor Party is doing well. And but diversity is good. Diversity, whatever it is, in all its meanings, is great because it's reflective of society. And I think being reflective of society is good because at least you get ideas and suggestions from all walks of life and all parts of society, and I think that will make society better and the country better.
I think this place reflects society at large, and if you think about what was it up until 1964, as a married woman you needed to resign from the public service. So yeah, we have changed as society has changed. I support entirely what Dr. Cohn was saying in terms of we need to be each other's support and we need to support each other, which is what women often do very well. And look, I'm really encouraged, to be honest, can I say I'm on the best side of 50 and I'm a new person in this place. And I think in terms of diversity and recognising women, to be able to be recognised at my time of life as somebody who has something to contribute as a woman is tremendously empowering. And I think we're recognising too that we've got longer journeys through life now. We can be productive at all ages, and I think we need to just respect everybody and respect, as John was saying, the different skills and strengths that people have and they bring. And then as society recognises the worth of each individual, this place will recognise the worth of each individual.
Great, thank you. Well, let's give our members panel a huge round of applause. Thank you so much for being available tonight in a vocation, I won't say a job, that is so full on, and I know that you've got so much to do, so it was lovely to have a yes and a thank you for being on the panel. And thank you so much to everybody here, because of course if you all weren't interested and if you didn't say yes, I want to come along, these events would not happen. So can I give everybody else an applause? as well. This is our very first one, as Mr President said, back in the Jubilee Room. You can see that the Parliament's still it's going through its critical maintenance, so we hope that that will be finishing up later in the year. But please come back to our other programs. And apologies if we didn't get round to having as many questions as we could have. Keep an eye out on our website, and you'll see this will be recorded and it will be available. Share it with other people. There's a couple of books outside. If you feel like buying one, go for it. But otherwise, thank you so much, and thank you again, everybody.
Thanks for coming.
Have a lovely evening.
Thank you.